Their Majesties King George and Queen Mary with their suite passed through Semmington on their way from Trowbridge to Melksham during their West of England tour. The royal procession occupied 18 motor cars. The children of the school, in the charge of their teachers, lined up in the centre of the village. The children waved flags and loudly cheered the royal party as they passed. The morning broke fine, and to the great relief of everyone, the rain god was subordinated, and before the royal party arrived, and while they were in the town, the sun evidenced itself in quite a becoming manner. Townspeople were busy hanging out their flags and banners, until the route along which the royal journey was to be made was one of picturesque flutter. A conspicuous welcome in a frame of evergreens was displayed on the premises of the King's Arms. People seemed to be pouring into the town from quite an early hour. Walls, raised gardens and upper windows gradually filled with anxious spectators, and in the streets they stood shoulder to shoulder in thick masses. Ladies brought the national tricolour into their millinery. Girls wore light little knots of the same combination, while the old local warriors furnished up their long since won decorations, a sort of striking contrast to not a few of the younger generation in whose buttonholes the silver badge appeared. The royal car came into view from the King Street direction at just about 1:15. The cheering that went up from the district rang along the line of spectators until the whole neighbourhood, so far as the vision carried, seemed to be a seething mass of cheering. Under the shadow of the town hall were lined up some 600 or 700 children from the church and council schools, graded according to age. They were for the most part furnished with little flags of national tricolour, and the sight of the royal car was the signal for cheering, which, beginning at one end, reached a mighty crescendo by the time it got to the other. It had been arranged for the military band from the Wiltshire Regiment's depot to take up a position in front of Dr. Care's residence, facing the marketplace, and play the national anthem as their Majesties reached the town. But by an unfortunate slip, the request did not reach the bandmaster, who with his men had taken up a position near the entrance to Messrs. Spencer & Co.'s works. The public were somewhat disappointed that the small amount of time at the disposal of the royal party did not give them the opportunity to obtain that view of their Majesties they would have liked. On the procession went without a stop to Messrs. Spencer & Co.'s engineering works, the King and Queen being cheered to the echo all along the line of route, not the least by the wounded soldiers recuperating in the town and the patients from the cottage hospital who were able to use the special accommodation provided for them on the rising ground in front of the institution. The Wilts Regimental Band struck up the national anthem as the royal party approached the works, where a guard of honour was mounted by the local company of volunteers. The King and Queen alighted at the grilled entrance gate, where they were received by Mr. William Littlejohn Phillip and Mr. Thomas Robert Murray, the joint managing directors. They at once proceeded to the splendidly equipped and comfortably arranged canteen. After the presentations, the King and Queen, accompanied by the rest of the party, made a tour of the works, being conducted by the managing directors. Passing on into the different departments, the King and Queen saw an astounding number of young women at an astounding number of jobs. As the royal visitors went round, the King inquired for some of the workers as to the particular jobs upon which they were engaged, and warmly shook hands with some of the grey-haired foremen. The munitions girls had made up their minds to present Her Majesty with a bouquet, but a reply was received from Buckingham Palace to the effect that Her Majesty would prefer that the money should be given for the benefit of the Red Cross work. The girls went round again and supplemented what they had already got until they were enabled to purchase 11 currency notes, each to the value of £1. These were placed in a neat little white silk sack, drawn together by the mouth of a gold cord. The Queen carried the bag around the works with her and handed it to Mr. Philip at the gate as she said goodbye for the local Red Cross hospitals. The card Her Majesty retained. Away went the cars again, this time to the works of the Avon India Rubber Company near the town bridge. Arrived at the pretty circular entrance to the offices, picturesque with its little island of greensward, the King and Queen were received by Mr. F.H. Nee, the chairman of the Urban Council. For this ceremony, a composite body of the Boy Scouts, Melksham Troop, Corsham Troop, and the Shaw and Atworth was drawn up on the right in a semicircle, and on the other flank the ground was kept by a party of convalescent soldiers from the local Red Cross hospitals. Their Majesties then proceeded on a tour of inspection of the works, accompanied by the officials of the company. No sooner were the royal party inside the works than they were greeted with a hearty cheer from the employees. Having made a close examination of what there was time to see on the ground floor, their Majesties were conducted upstairs to another department of almost endlessly long benches upon which experts of both sexes dealt with remarkable dexterity with rubber of another kind, which was being transformed into inner tubes for motors and probably other pneumatic tired vehicles. Across the other side of the same building was an entirely different class of work. Girls are here industriously engaged in the manufacture of golf balls. Then their Majesties went to what is called the mechanical department, where all sorts of appliances in use on the railways are made. No sooner did their Majesties come into open view than a crescendo of voices raised a vociferous cheer, and soon the royal visitors were passing through an avenue of work people, congratulated themselves that it was not until half a minute later that a shop siren sounded and that they were not summoned to their respective duties until they had the privilege of seeing the King and Queen to the best possible advantage. The men and women cheered their royal visitors as far as they see them down a long, nicely gravelled path. On their way out, the King and Queen passed down the rank of convalescent soldiers who stood to attention and spoke or smiled sympathetically as they went. Next came the formal decoration by the King of an Australian soldier. He was Sergeant Hancock, formerly of the 2nd Anzac Force, the 4th Light Horse, and now transferred to the 2nd Mounted Anzac Force. He is convalescing in one of the Melksham Red Cross hospitals, and while the King pinned the military medal on his brawny chest, the sergeant stood rigidly to attention, subsequently coming smart up to salute after he had received the word of congratulation and a hearty handshake from the King. It was evidently one of the proudest moments in the gallant colonial's life, and if he is spared a return to the bosom of his kinsfolk down under, he will probably recall the incident with the justifiable pride of a loyal subject and a good soldier. The other incident was the almost casual meeting of the King with a Crimea veteran. The old warrior had been granted a place amongst the privileged few in the circle where the presentations were made, and the King noticed him. His name is ex-Staff Sergeant E. James, who is spending the autumn of his life at Shaw. He soldiered with the old 55th Border Regiment and saw active service in the Crimea. On his chest was a display of medals. The number was 5, and they included 2 Turkish medals, one for the Bulgarian campaign, the Crimea with bars for Balaclava, Sebastopol, Inkerman and Alma, Indian Mutiny Medal with Bhutan and Delhi, and also a decoration for long service and good conduct. He had never seen King George before to his knowledge, but he had pleasant recollections of his grandmother. As the old man put it, at those hands he once received a medal and £15. The King had quite a conversation with the old patriarchal bearded warrior. The veteran warrior voiced his thanks, incidentally drawing the King's attention to a stripling at his side, who he said was Teddy Bryant, his grandson. Having taken leave of the company's officials and others, their Majesties were soon in the car again and on their way to the station, where the royal train was waiting. The crowd, which had now concentrated in this part of the town, dwarfed all other assemblies, and their cheering beat all which had been heard before. Happy in the sense that they had seen the king and queen, the crowd quickly made way for the royal car. The royal train had by this time been pulled into the station, and the queen and the king and their suite passed into the respective saloons. The queen soon removed her hat and coat and seemed glad to sit down. The king remained at the window and waved a farewell. Thus happily ended the royal visit to the West, everything passing off without the suggestion of a hitch.